First time I ever went to East Jerusalem to visit my family, we were going through boxes and boxes and boxes of photographs. And we came across one of my brother, of Ahmed, and he was a boy, he's a young boy. And lots of kids around him. It looked like a party.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, it's Ahmed. My sister said, yeah, that's the party we threw the day he got out of prison.
Wow.
First time. And I looked more closely at the picture with this new information, and I actually realized that all of the kids around him were smiling, but he was not.
Why is that?
You could see in his eyes that he was traumatized.
He was traumatized.
Totally traumatized.
What did he do to deserve prison?
He threw stones at Israeli tanks that were trying to flatten nearby villages, nearby Palestinian villages. Subsequently, you could say he was institutionalized from a young age. I mean, as you would be if you were put in prison at the age of 12, and then again at the age of 13, and again at the age of 14, 15, 16. And he has developed very serious mental health problems as a result.
In a world where Palestinians face ongoing displacement, fragmentation and erasure, from the occupied West Bank and Gaza to the global diaspora, understanding what holds identity together has never been more urgent. To explore this, I am joined by Kieran Andrieu, a Palestinian British journalist whose father is from occupied Palestine, Jerusalem. Kieran's story is deeply rooted in the lived experience of a people scattered by colonial power, yet still bound by the shared sense of history, resilience, and belonging. Together, we will talk about what it means to be a Palestinian across borders, the impact of Western narrative and political complicity, and how identity survives under constant threat. Let's get into it. So Kieran, thank you very much for joining me today. It's really good to see you here. I have one question before we start the podcast. Are you Kieran Andrieu or Karim Abul Hawa today?
That's a very good and daunting question. Maybe by the end
It's a very simple one, though. You're in Palestine deep dive.
I am Karim Abul Hawa. Of course, good. I'm Karim Abul Hawa. And we'll hopefully unpack a little bit of what that might mean.
Well, that's exactly why I wanted to have this interview with you today. I remember a few weeks ago we met here in Palestine Deep Dive Studio, and I heard your story. And then for the following week or so, I was thinking, wow, he's a Palestinian, I am a Palestinian. You don't look like a Palestinian very well. You don't sound like a Palestinian, but you are a Palestinian, 100% Palestinian. You and I are coming from two different worlds. You are Palestinian, British, French, I'm Palestinian, just Palestinian, very boring. But we had different lives.
Yeah.
And that actually reminded me that we Palestinians, unfortunately, we have been fragmented by design by the Israelis. You're from Jerusalem, I'm from Gaza. And we only met in London, in the UK. If we did not meet in London, maybe it would be impossible for us to meet. Actually, all of my Palestinian friends who are from the West Bank, Jerusalem, from Palestine 48, the Palestinian refugees who are scattered all around the world, I met each one of them only outside of Palestine in the UK. And that, I believe that this fragmentation is designed deliberately by Israel to make us far from each other, to make us separated from each other, to make us not relate to each other. But here we are, Palestinian from Jerusalem, Palestinian from Gaza, meeting here in London and talking together. So tell me your story.
Well, just to say briefly, Ahmed, first of all, thanks for having me here. Second of all, on your reflections there, our great-grandfathers, our great-great-grandfathers, they may well have been companions, they may have played together in the orange groves long before the creation of the State of Israel and their forced displacement. They were united, our communities were obviously not monolithic, but they were contiguous, they were cohesive, and they were geographically placed, And of course, as you say, since then, there's just been this enormous process of fragmentation, which has meant that your family history for the past 50, 60, 70, 80 years is located in Gaza. And my family history for the past 50, 60, 70, 80 years is located almost exclusively in East Jerusalem or in the places in the diaspora where it ended up. So the United States, in my case, of course, London, Britain. So yeah, I think it's really, really good to be here talking to you and to try and bring some of those fragments back together, right? My family history, well, as far as I know and as far back as we can go, my grandfather was a young man called Ahmed from East Jerusalem. He enlisted in, because you'll know that during the Nakba, there was a failure to properly conscript and organise countervailing armies, partly, of course, very largely by design. The British had ensured that Arab resistance or Palestinian resistance had been kept at bay for as long as possible. But you could volunteer as a young Palestinian to fight against the Nakba. And my grandfather, Ahmed, did that. And in April 1948, he was shot. So he was, and he survived. He was shot in the head.
Wow.
So he was debilitated, but he wasn't killed. And that was the end of his time trying to resist the Nakba. But from there, he, as I say, survived, went on to have 13 children.
13 children?
13 children.
Wow. That's a very Palestinian thing.
It's a very Palestinian thing. What about your parents? What were they?
Well, my father has 9 children, or he had 9 children.
Yeah.
We're 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think my grandfather had 9 or 10.
Really?
I don't remember.
So my dad's dropped off. It was 13. He's had 7, which is a lot of children. But
I know.
he's cut it in half.
I know.
The generation before him was double that. Anyway, so he went on to have 13 kids, my grandfather. One of them was my dad, born in 1960. But he was kind of the middle, roughly in the middle of the 13. So the eldest was my uncle, Naif, who was in the PLO, in Fatah and the PLO in the 1970s. So in the resistance, some of the resistance movements. And he, I think, became fairly senior.
Okay.
And one day, early 1980s, he was disappeared. So we don't know what happened to him, but we assume.
Until now, you don't know what happened.
I mean, the strong assumption is, of course, that he was, that Mossad dealt with him.
Where was he?
Where was he when he went missing? He was travelling. He had a kid in Barcelona.
Okay.
And he was travelling back and forth. And I believe that's the last that we knew of him. He was travelling out there.
Wow. But did you communicate with the Spanish authorities asking about the fate of your uncle?
I never have. It was before I was born.
Yeah.
1981.
Your family?
My family did, and they tried to get to the bottom of what happened, and I don't think they got very far.
Of course.
Very sad. His son, also called Ahmed. I'm not just saying that to endear myself to.
I know.
It's a very popular name in my family.
Well, when I was at school in Gaza, in every classroom there would always be at least 7 or 8 Ahmeds.
Right.
At least. So that's why my teachers used to call me with my last name. Not because they wanted to respect me. It's because there are too many Ahmeds.
Yeah, you could do that in my family. I mean, there's many of them. But my Uncle Naif's son, he says that when he was going through the border into Palestine, well, of course, via Israeli infrastructure, they said to him, "Where's your dad?" And to which he replied, "You tell me."
Wow.
So we never got to the bottom of it. We don't know. I felt so sorry. I haven't seen him in a number of years, but I felt so sorry for him. He told me that whenever he would go to visit our family there, he had a similar experience to me. One parent was Palestinian, one parent was European. His mother was Spanish. But when he went there, he said that our grandmother, who I never met, she died before I met any of them, she would just cry her eyes out because she missed her eldest son so much. And Ahmed, who was just a kid at the time, reminded her of her disappeared son, her missing son.
Yeah.
So that's my father's eldest brother. I think going down the generations, there's two things of significance to say about my generation.
Yeah.
So my mother went travelling and she met my dad. They had a relationship. My mum came back to England, which is where I was born and raised, even though she's French. That's complicated and irrelevant why she was in England. But my dad stayed there, didn't want to leave. But he went on to have 6 children after me. And the eldest of those is called Ahmed,
Wow.
my brother Ahmed, who ended up in prison from the age of about 12, in and out of prison. Israeli prisons, I should say. And
From the age of 12?
he was 12.
What did he do to deserve a prison?
He threw stones at Israeli tanks that were trying to flatten nearby villages, nearby Palestinian villages. So he grew up in Mount of Olives in East Jerusalem. And there was this process that was very typical in the late 1990s, early 2000s, especially Ahmed, I mean, you'll know all about it, of showing resistance by going to throw stones at tanks. Right, it's much less common now because nobody can be sure that those tanks won't just fire on children, of course, whether you're in East Jerusalem or West Bank. But back then it was a very typical form of resistance. Even going back into the 1980s, I mean, it's partly why the first Intifada happened, right, in 87. And the Palestinian child throwing stones became kind of a symbol of Palestinian resistance.
Yes.
Anyway, he was engaged in that. He was doing that kind of thing with local boys, showing resistance. So for throwing rocks from the floor at armoured vehicles, he was rounded up, locked up, came out of prison some months later, I think, but after that it was the Israeli authorities had him on a short leash. And he was closely watched, and everything he did was monitored, and he was in and out of prison. And subsequently, you could say he was institutionalized from a young age. I mean, as you would be if you were put in prison at the age of 12, and then again at the age of 13, and again at the age of 14, 15, 16. And he has developed very serious mental health problems as a result. So schizophrenia being one. And this is just a reality for him. I remember, Ahmed, the first time I ever went to East Jerusalem to visit my family, we were going through boxes and boxes and boxes of photographs. And we came across one of my brother, of Ahmed, and he was a boy, he was a young boy. And lots of kids around him. It looked like a party.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, it's Ahmed." My sister said, "Yeah, that's the party we threw the day he got out of prison, first time." And I looked more closely at the picture with this new information, and I actually realised that all of the kids around him were smiling, but he was not.
Why is that?
You could see in his eyes that he was traumatized.
He was traumatized.
Totally traumatized. Totally traumatized. But it was like the photo changed before my eyes with that new context, because I'd just seen it and assumed he was a smiling boy. But if I looked closer and with that new information, I realised that he was harrowed, utterly harrowed. There's various other instances of violence in my family, as there would be, Ahmed. But we talked about having this conversation, and we talked about it as a conversation. And I think the reason I really, really wanted to speak to you about all of this is because, like you said, the Palestinian experience is fragmented by design. And I think that there's something useful, I hope, in understanding what that fragmentation looks like in reality and how it plays out through real people's lives, i.e. yours and mine, in the far-flung and disparate ways that it deploys people. So all of that is a very abstract and long way of saying this. My family experiences, and we don't create a hierarchy of suffering as Palestinians. We must not. It's important we don't. And I know that that's what you've always emphasised to me. But I want to hear about your family story as well. And I also want to say that, you know, hopefully we can start to unpack and grapple with some of these themes, but I have always felt a strong sense of guilt. I've always felt a strong sense of guilt as a Euro-Palestinian or a Palestinian with a European mother, white passing in some cases, in some contexts, not always, but in many. I would wager more than you are white passing. So with the privilege that that confers on me, and with a European name. And East Jerusalemites. I mean, East Jerusalem, you know, in the apartheid system, we're
the most privileged.
We're the superior inferiors. We're the superior inferiors, right? You know, as far as the racist king superstructure of Israeli apartheid and Zionism goes, that's the case. And so I really wanted to have this discussion with you, not in a self-flagellating way, but I want to be able to talk to you about.
Well, I think my family and your family are very similar in many ways. When you were talking about your grandfather who was shot in the head, I remembered my great-grandfather in the Nakba. And even before the Nakba, you know, maybe this is something I did not talk much about, but one of my great-grandfathers, he was the father of my grandmother, and his name was Ahmed Alnaouq. And, you know, I'm just saying what I heard from my neighbors and my family and so many people when I was as young as 6 or 7 years old. And it was believed that this man possessed superpowers. He was very strong, like very, very, very strong. And this is actually true. So I've always heard stories about him. And he died, or he was killed in 1948. That was 77 years ago. But when I was 6 and 7 years old, I would hear stories about his strength and power from the neighbors, from some distant family members. So he was very powerful that generations remembered his story. And I was told by my aunt, who's now 80 years old, I think, she told me during the 30s and 40s when the British mandate was there in Palestine, they discovered this man, my great-grandfather, and they recruited him to serve in the British Army.
Wow.
So imagine a Palestinian forced to serve in the British Army. And then he had to do it because he had no option. And that's, I think, in the 30s or 40s, I don't know, but that was before the Nakba. And then my aunt would tell me how much he was being discriminated against and insulted day and night, and then he couldn't tolerate it.
In the British Army.
Yeah, and then he attacked his officer, and then he ran away from Palestine. And he came back to Palestine, I think, after the dismantlement of the British, of the mandate, or before. I don't really remember. I will have to. But I know that he came back to Palestine. He married a Lebanese woman when he ran away to Lebanon, and he came with her to Gaza, to Deir al-Balah. And during the Nakba, he was in Deir al-Balah with my father. That was a few months after the Nakba. And his daughter, who's my grandmother, was giving birth to my father. And while she was giving birth to my father, her father, went out to the market with his brother. And in that market, an Israeli airplane came and dropped a bomb on that market, killing 150 Palestinians in Deir al-Balah, including him and his brother. All that happened while my grandmother was giving birth to my father, or on the same day of the birth of my father. So, you know, And that's why I always say my father was born during the Nakba and he was killed during the second Nakba. But that is our life.
Yeah.
His grandfather was killed. My grandfather from my mother's side, I think they came from Bir Saba, Bir Sheba now they call it. And they were also refugees. And he lost his brother when he was only a teen, like 13 or 14, and he was shot while they were immigrating to Gaza, and then they came back to Gaza. But when you were talking and telling your stories, it's the same stories that we have in Gaza. It's funny that you, no matter how Israel tries to fragment the Palestinians, it's still the kind of oppression that is being practiced on you. It is the same that is being practiced on us. I remember when I was very young, when I was 7 and 8 years old, before the Israelis withdrew from Gaza, I remember my colleagues, my schoolmates, and my neighbors would go to a nearest spot, to an Israeli settlement in Deir al-Balah. It used to be called the Kfar Darom, I think. And then we would go and they would go and throw rocks at the tanks.
Yeah.
I never threw rocks at the tank.
Yeah.
I was always very shy. But I still remember when an Israeli tank would came and it would start shooting at the kids. And my brother, he once witnessed an Israeli tank shooting several Palestinian young kids. Many of them were his friends, and I still remember that. He was, I think, only 9 years old, and he came back to us horrified, my brother Ayman. And that's what made him eventually join the resistance.
Right.
Eventually, because what do you expect from a man who lived his entire life under oppression, who saw, when he was a young kid, his friends being shot at and killed? Anyway, so this is our life, living under oppression your entire life, having to lose family members and hearing stories of your great-grandfather or a grandfather being shot at or killed, living your entire life under siege, under blockade, under occupation. Now, I think with time, the Israelis designed a different kind of a fragmentation between the Palestinian people, in a way that the Israelis wanted to make us feel that we're different from each other.
Right.
The Palestinians in the West Bank are different from the Palestinians in Gaza. They want to fragment the Palestinians. So they designed and engineered different problems for each group of people so that we feel disconnected to each other. If you have different life, if you have different problems, if you have a different lifestyle, then they thought that they will separate the Palestinians from each other. And that's why. But I mean, they have been trying to do that for a long time. But I don't think they will win eventually, because we Palestinians are all united in our understanding that the root cause of all of our problems is the occupation.
Yeah, and it's Zionism.
And Zionism.
Is Zionism.
Of course.
I mean, you're right, it's occupation, but it's a particular kind of occupation.
It is racism, I think. And for me, Zionism is a form of racism.
Of course.
Zionism is an ideology that sees a group of people better and more deserving than the others. And it just happens that these people who they see that they're better than us are invaders, colonizers, and we are the indigenous people of the land. And we're being discriminated against. So it doesn't matter how much we live under occupation, 77 years or 100 years or 200 years. I think we are all united in this understanding that we have a common enemy, and this common enemy is racism. It is Zionism, it is colonialism, all of these bad ideologies.
Well, and it's determined to wipe us out, right? It's determined to exterminate us. And it won't stop, really. And I think more and more people who are non-Palestinian and non-Arab, and maybe non-Muslim, you might broaden the net as far as to say that, they've woken up to that reality more now, which is that ultimately, the Zionist project, properly rendered, is one that concludes with the total absorption of all of historic Palestine into a land portfolio called Israel.
Yes.
And that's the logical conclusion. That's the telos. It's not an accident. It's not an unfortunate byproduct. It is absolutely by design, and it's part of the architecture.
And they cannot win without us being wiped out. So they intended from the very beginning to wipe out the Palestinian population so that they can take the land, all of the land for themselves.
They could have done it without wiping us all out if we had just obligingly packed up our bags and left. If we'd done that...
Who would do that?
Exactly. Listen, no human being on Earth, no human community on Earth would submit to that, and nor should they. And so, because human beings have agency, and because we're tied to home and tied to the land, and it's our land, obviously it was asking the impossible that every Palestinian should obligingly step aside and allow a settler colony to absorb all of our historic homeland. And for that reason, we're now on a collision course with a kind of expansivist or expansioning Israel, greater Israel, determined to wipe us out. I think history is full of contingencies, right? So it's not like, I'm not a sort of somebody who subscribes to a kind of determinist view of history, like it was ever thus or it was always going to be like this. Zionism, within the logic of Zionism, it was always going to be like this. But of course, the point about, an ideology or an idea or whatever is it interacts with the real world. It interacts with the material world.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is not that it was always inevitable. We Palestinians are always destined to be, smited from the face of the earth, and we're facing an existential battle, and that was written in the stars or anything like that. The logic of Zionism is deterministic. It's the way that fits into the real world that allows for the contingencies and opens up the possibilities of Palestinian resistance against the odds as well.
And it's very important that we keep talking about it, because right now in the media, especially in the mainstream media, they always try to start the conversation from the 7th of October or after the 7th of October. And this is wrong. Like Marid al-Barghouti once said that if you want to win any argument, you start from secondly. And it's very important that we always start the argument. It is always important that we start a conversation from the root cause of all of these problems. And it is Zionism, it is settler colonialism, it is occupation. And if we want to really help our audience understand what is really happening, we have to go back to the cause root of all of our problems.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea that this started on October 7th is tantamount to, in my view, Ahmed, it's tantamount to somebody wandering into a cinema 10 minutes from the end, or at the beginning of the third act of the film, and saying, great, I'm glad I caught the trailers. You are missing out. It's like an iceberg. You're missing out all of that enormous historical context, which leads us to where we are, and which obviously created the conditions for October 7th.
Yes. Let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
You were talking about your family and your grandfather and your father, but you grew up here in this country.
Yeah.
So tell me, when did you really know that you are a Palestinian and you have a Palestinian identity?
I think that I was aware that I was maybe not exactly like the other boys and girls at school.
Did you feel that, or were you told that you are not the same?
Well, I was told, my mum was very good at least, I don't have a perfect memory of the way everything played out, but the impression I get, the sense I get in the kind of passage, through the passage of time, is that actually she was very good at kind of conveying sensitively information to me that my father was absent, that he wasn't from where we were from, and that gradually, once that had landed, if you like, that created a kind of foundation to then build on and kind of convey to me the information that maybe where he's from is difficult place, a violent place, a place where there's violence maybe meted out against he and his community. That was kind of layered on gradually by my mum. And she did a very good job of doing that in a sensitive and gentle way. You know, when you're a kid, you don't think, oh, I'm Palestinian, and have a kind of fully fledged idea, a crystallized idea of what being Palestinian means.
Yeah.
But you gradually sift through the information and you work it out in a kind of symbolic constellation that makes sense to you, right, as a child. And I think I became gradually more and more aware when I was maybe 8, 9 years old. My dad wasn't around.
Okay.
And of course, the way I often thought about my connection to Palestine after it kind of became fully legible to me that I was something called, well, at least I was half something called Palestinian. It was very much I saw it through the prism of an absent father.
Yeah.
But not even really in a kind of, you know, screw you, Dad, you're absent kind of way.
Yeah.
It was more of a, you know, maybe one day I'll meet him, maybe one day I won't. You know, maybe I'll never meet him, maybe I will. And so my understanding of Palestine and being Palestinian was intimately bound up with all of that.
Yeah.
And then I did meet him when I was 10. He came to visit.
Yeah.
Didn't expect that necessarily to happen, but he came to visit, and that then I started to get more serious, I think, because I was older as well. I was 10. I had a bit more kind of consciousness about the world and was maybe starting to take some things a bit more seriously or be curious about things. I then started to, since I had a kind of flesh and blood example as well that I actually met in my father, I started to think, and you know, and I could see my dad was a brown man.
Yeah.
He was darker than me. He was certainly darker than my mum. So I started to take it more seriously as, you might say, I don't want to say a political issue, but you know, as Palestine as we know it, it's a personal thing, but it's also a struggle. It's also a political thing. We'll come on to that more in a moment, I'm sure. So I guess that's how I kind of came to consciousness around being Palestinian. It was a slow process. It was a process that began with things that are more familiar to a child and then gradually kind of moved out into the political stuff. And then 11, 12, 13, I really became very, you know, always going to Palestine Solidarity Campaign meetings, tagging along with my mum.
Tell me more. When did you start to develop this political identity that you have right now?
I guess people would maybe say quite young, 10, 11.
10, 11?
Yeah, 10, 11, 12. I would go along to the meetings with my mum and I wouldn't say anything. I didn't, you know, have an enormous amount to contribute at that point. But I did absorb it all. And I think I became quite obsessively focused on Palestinian struggle. And also the flip side of that, which is, of course, the crimes of Israel. I became quite obsessive about understanding this entity called Israel. Not just my own history, but the history of a colony and a colonizing people that had turned my own personal history completely on its head, as of course it did yours and your family's. This hugely disruptive force in all of our lives as Palestinians.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand intricately everything about Israeli history in order to fight. I mean, I say fight, I mean debate, fight, you know, verbally and intellectually, fight pro-Israel apologists for Zionism. And I thought it was absolutely necessary to go toe-to-toe with them, to understand who the Israeli prime ministers in the 1960s and 50s were, to understand, you know, what happened when in terms of parcels of land, our land being annexed and so on, absorbed into Greater Israel, bit by bit, you know, square foot by square foot. I thought it was essential to understand the kind of tenets of Zionism, the progenitors of Zionism, what happened during the British Mandate, what happened before the British Mandate.
So you studied all of that before you went to Palestine?
Long before. But I didn't go to Palestine until 2019.
Okay, I'm really interested to know this. You have been studying Palestine. You have always known that you are Palestinian, that you have a Palestinian identity. And then in 2019, you visited Palestine for the first time. How did that make you feel? Did it change your understanding about Palestine in any way?
Well, I had tickets to go in 2014.
Okay,
and
there was the war.
The flights were grounded because of one of the many, what's the awful phrase, mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
The Israeli military says in Gaza. It was it protective edge or pillar of defense? One of those.
2014.
2014.
When I lost my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first family member.
Yeah, and I want, if we may, talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that period of your family history as well, Ahmed, in a while. But so I wasn't able to go, and in a way, I want to break with what we were going to say and just say, actually, that's a perfect illustration of the fragmentation of our lives as Palestinians, and actually, eschewing as we do the kind of hierarchy of suffering, it also encapsulates my relative version of suffering versus your very, very first-hand extreme version of suffering. So my version in 2014, because of that onslaught, was that my flight was grounded and I couldn't go and visit my family in East Jerusalem for the first time. Okay, it's bad, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not.
Your version is that your brother is killed.
Yeah.
Because of the very bombs that are preventing me from flying. And it's quite a stark juxtaposition for me. It's quite a stark contrast.
Yeah. Again, I always I hate to compare suffering here and there. I don't believe that was suffering, to be honest, like cancelling your...
It's not suffering.
Your trip, but...
It's not suffering at all.
Yeah.
But it's the consequence of it. And that's to show it's not,
How did that make you feel? Like...
What, not being able to go?
Yeah.
I didn't, whatever. Honestly, I think I went to Barcelona instead.
Yeah. This is what we call in the Palestinian dialect, مشاكل العالم الأول. First world problems.
Yeah, first world problems, exactly. Yeah. So, it's important that comes out, and it's important that that's discussed, because that's part of my experience, and it's part of the, So, essentially, I didn't get to go. I went in 2019.
You went to Palestine for the first time?
Yeah.
Then meeting your family members?
Well, I mean...
Palestinian home.
Where do you start? I mean, where do I start? Mount of Olives, have you been?
I was never allowed to leave Gaza to other parts of Palestine.
Right.
And that's why, to be honest, that's why I always ask my Palestinian friends who live in the West Bank or Jerusalem, whenever I meet them, I would always ask them, tell me more about Palestine. Tell me, how did Palestine look? How does it look?
Yeah.
Tell me more about Jerusalem. Yeah. Tell me more about Nablus. Tell me more about Hebron. Tell me more about Jaffa, where my family came from. So I'm really eager to hear.
So I think that's a perfect kind of basis on which to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
If you went there, what you would be struck by is the beauty of the old city. Mm-hmm. You've seen pictures of it, of course, many, many times. You've seen it in your dreams, maybe.
I'm developing now a habit of going to these YouTube channels of young Palestinians who, I don't know what you call it. They go to the old city of Jerusalem and Jaffa, and they take videos and talk more about it. And now I've watched all the videos there is about the old Palestinian cities. And yesterday I was watching another video of this guy called El Afghani. I don't know if you know him or not. And he went to Jaffa and he did a video on Jaffa, recording the old city, talking about the old city of Jaffa. And that was one of the most painful videos I ever watched, because if there was no Israel, I would have been living there in Jaffa.
Absolutely.
My grandfather and my grandmother were living in Jaffa. I would have been residents of Jaffa. And it's the most beautiful place you could ever go to.
We visited.
The same for Jerusalem, the same for the cities of the West Bank. And
it's funny you say...
It's very painful experience, I would say. Very painful.
So when you say Jaffa, so that makes me think of, so we went there. We went to visit it. And again, I mean, in a way, this is, again, an illustration of the absurdity and the injustice of the situation. Why should I, a Palestinian who was born and raised in Brighton, why should I be able to fly over, visit my family, and they are able, because they're East Jerusalemite, they're Palestinian, they're Muslim, they're treated like shit, of course they are, they suffer violence, but they're able to drive on Israeli roads as second-class citizens, but they're still able to drive up to Tel Aviv and Jaffa. And when I was there last, my brother and sisters, they really wanted us to go to the beach. They really wanted us to go to the beach. So we went. And they said to me, what do you think of Tel Aviv? And I said, I think it's a city built on an ancient burial ground. I think it's a city whose bricks and mortar are slathered together with the blood of Palestinians. I think it's built on the bones, the heaps of scores of generations of Palestinians, dead Palestinians. And they said, yeah, you're right. And I said, so why are we coming here? Why are we here? Why are we in Tel Aviv? I hate this fucking place. And they said, it's ours. It's not theirs, it's ours. And we can come here, just about. We might not be able to in 10 years or even 5 years, but we still can, and it's ours. And so we're going to keep coming here. And, you know, fair enough, I had to shut up when they said that to me.
It's not only, Tel Aviv is not only built on the ruins of the Palestinian homes and on the graves of the Palestinian homes, but unfortunately was built with the Palestinian labor.
Absolutely.
You know, my father, who Israel killed, and they killed his children and grandchildren. My father spent more than 20 years working in Tel Aviv, building these houses and these towers.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for me to say that the Palestinian people built Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
The labor of the Palestinians built Tel Aviv. But unfortunately, this is another problem, is that Israel crippled the economy of the Palestinians and make us dependent on them. So that if we don't work there in Israel, then we would starve, we would not afford to live at all. And unfortunately, my father was one of these people. But what reward did he get? Is that they killed him and killed all of his children, and his home was destroyed. And that was Tel Aviv and Jaffa. And I remember when my father used to work in Israel, and one day he came to us and he told us, you know, one of the things that I regret the most in my life is not having these conversations with my father when he was young. But I still remember some of the conversations that he used to tell us, and I always say these stories over and over and over again, partly because I want the memory of my father to be there. I want his stories to be immortalized. And one of the things that I could never forget is a story that my father told me at some point when he was working in Israel. And he said, he was talking about a neighbor of ours. And my father and him, they would go every day to work in Israel. My father would leave home every day at 2 a.m. And then he returned at evening every day. So he would have a few hours for sleep and then go again, because long way to Tel Aviv or whatever cities he used to work in. And he told me one day they were hired, my father and this neighbor were hired to build in a farm or something in what is now called Israel.
Yeah.
But when his neighbor went there and he saw this piece of land, he started sobbing and crying. My father asked him, why do you cry? And he said, this land belonged to me before the Nakba. And now he's forced to work and farm this land that he used to own and his fathers used to own and for generations. And that is something that I remember. I believe I heard this story first time when I was 5 years old, and I could not forget this story. And I could not forgive those who made us feel this way. Imagine.
And so you were, I was going to ask you, when you were first aware of being Palestinian? Because that's what you asked me, right? In the context of me being raised in England.
Yeah.
And I was almost going to ask it slightly tongue-in-cheek, but actually,
Yeah.
there you have another kind of antinomy, because
Yeah.
I'm introduced to my Palestinianness gently, sensitively, gradually, by a white mother, a white European mother. At the same age, you're learning these kinds of traumatic historical episodes, stories, and that's your way, if you like, of becoming familiar with and conscious of the fact that you're Palestinian.
Yeah, it's a very different experience, you know.
It's a very
you and I.
different
Very, very different. I don't remember when I started to understand that I'm a Palestinian. I have always, when I was young, I used to have a really good memory. Now I'm almost lost my memory. But when I was young, I remember when I was 3 years old, and I remember some vivid memories when I was 3 years old, and 4 years old, and 5 years old, and 6 years old. And that was all about, believe it or not, it was all about experiences related to the horror we were living as Palestinians.
I can believe
Mostly, mostly like remembering when my father would go to work in Israel. And every day, one of the most vivid experiences I have, or memories I have, is every day my mother, when it's close to be evening, she would look at the window. The window of her living room was opposite to the street. She would wait for hours every day for my father to come back from Israel, every single day. And he's always late. And she would always say, Ahmed, she wouldn't talk to me, Ahmed, as Ahmed, or to all of our kids, to all of her kids. Your father is late. What's happened to him? Maybe he was shot. Maybe he was killed. Maybe he was imprisoned. What took him so long? And then eventually my father would come very, very tired after a long, long, long day of work in Israel. And these were my memories. So in my memory, in my awareness, it was always, we are the Palestinians. We are being subjugated by the Israelis. The Israelis might kill my father, might detain him, might arrest him. Sometimes my father would spend weeks in Israel hiding. You know, you remember at the Second Intifada, my father would sometimes, when there is like clashes or problems with the Palestinians and the Israelis, my father would hide in Israel for a week or two. And he would not come back to us, and we would be very, very worried about him. And I remember one day he had to hide in a barrel for a few days because the Israelis were like chasing down any Palestinian they see. And I still remember all of that. So in my memory, in my awareness, being a Palestinian meant
having to hide.
Humiliation.
Humiliation, yeah.
Yeah, and horror, and living under occupation.
Whereas to me, what it always meant, when I became politically conscious, so when I was about 11, 12, 13, and I was really becoming, what it meant was to be righteous. To be Palestinian was to be righteous.
Interesting.
It meant that that my people were, not me, because I was always very aware of that, but it meant that my family were. And I guess by some extension,
interesting.
There was a bit of that stardust around me or something, but it meant that my community, my people, my family, they were special. They were noble.
Wow.
They were the last bulwark or something against a colonial form of power. And that meant that the Palestinians were not existentially, not, forever, not mystically or something. I don't really believe, I'm not a religious person. So it could very well be that in 100 or 150 years, the Palestinians are average again, they're mediocre once we're liberated. And we have every chance and right to be average. But for now, so long as we're subjugated, or so long as my family are subjugated, this is how I viewed it as a kid, I belong to a special family.
Yeah.
And I belong to a special group.
That's really, really, really interesting. You know, sometimes I understand more about my identity when I grow up, and most of the times when I am outside of Gaza. I understood a lot about being a Palestinian when I left Palestine than when I was in Palestine. Because when I was in Palestine, everything about being a Palestinian, for me at least, not for many Palestinians, it was the persecution, what meant to be Palestinian. Because I have lived my entire life. Like the blockade started in Gaza when I was maybe 13 years old.
Yeah.
And that is when I started to grow up, like, and start to develop my political awareness. And it was always under the blockade and constant wars and incursions and all of that. And that made me, in my mind, always feel that being a Palestinian means being the persecuted,
Right.
the subjugated person,
Yeah.
the one who lives in horror and the siege and all of that. When I left Palestine, that had changed for me. Right now, when I think of Palestine, I think of it the same way that you describe, as being gratuitous, as being like the forefront of the fight against barbarism. And sometimes I feel that this kind of understanding that I have came to is a kind of a privilege.
Yeah.
That only the Palestinians who don't live in Palestine came, reach this kind of conclusion. People who live under persecution, under horror, under occupation, under suffering their entire life, maybe they don't have the luxury to think of Palestine in this way. I don't understand.
I think luxury is an important word. You know, I mean, I could say privilege, luxury, but I was going to say that, well, actually, it's quite nice to hear that when you left, you started to feel that way as well, actually. That's quite nice to hear, both because I care about how you feel about things, obviously, and also because it makes me feel a bit less like it was something that I could just enjoy because of luxury or privilege. It's something maybe that's a bit more common or widespread. I think that I stopped feeling like that to an extent as well.
Okay.
It was something that was tied up with the idealism or innocence of childhood, in a way. And I think I still feel it in a way. I'm sure you do, you know, the nobility of whatever, you know, the sort of the idealism, the nobility, the strength, the sense that, you know, the world is looking to us to resist things and so on, or our people to resist things. But it's also heavily tempered by a sense that none of us fucking asked for this. I mean, you didn't ask for it firsthand. I didn't ask for it secondhand for my family. None of us asked for any of this. No, we didn't ask to be righteous. We didn't ask for this role.
Definitely.
We actually, you know, James Baldwin, one of my great, great heroes, brilliant moral force and moral voice as much as anything else. He said, and he was speaking to the white man, he said, look inside yourself and you'll see something scarier to you than anything else you could reflect on, which is that in the end, I want the same things as you. I want the same thing that you want, which is that I want to be left alone.
Wow.
That's all. Sometimes I feel very strongly that that's all I could wish for Palestinians, is that we get to a situation where we can be left the fuck alone. And then sometimes I feel full of righteous anger and proud of our solidarity, linkages and networks across time and space. And I feel like we are really doing something on behalf of the rest of the world, and that we're, you know, it's a glorious anti-colonial struggle and so on. And it's traumatic. Of course it's traumatic, and it's evil. Of course it's evil, but it means something, that its weight is something that will last. But it's a mixture of those two feelings. It's a mixture of those two feelings, I guess.
Wow. Well, you describe it very, very eloquently. Yes, I am very proud of being Palestinian. I like being Palestinian. But also I did not decide to be Palestinian. And there are some people in the world who think that we Palestinians are guilty at birth for being Palestinians, that we deserve death, that we deserve destruction. And that's very, very horrible, actually. But looking at the future, Kieran, how optimistic or pessimistic you are that the Palestinians one day will be average, normal human beings, not victims or heroes?
Well, let's talk about areas to be positive about. Okay, we know, I mean, you know better than I do, Ahmed, but we both know in our own ways that everything has got worse on the ground. Everything, facts on the ground, as it's called. Every fact on the ground.
Yeah.
Of course, in Gaza, I mean, goes without saying.
Devastated, destroyed.
Just pulverized and genocided, and that's where we are right now. The West Bank, increasingly colonized. East Jerusalem, nothing compared to Gaza. Nothing really compared to some parts of the West Bank. But still, life is harder and harder and harder for people in Sheikh Jarrah, for people in Mount of Olives, where my family are from, which is right on the border with Sheikh Jarrah, neighbours it. So facts on the ground have all got worse. What's got better? It sounds maybe frivolous or trivial compared to that, but international public opinion has enormously shifted.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a huge, seismic, tectonic shift over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And one thing I can say, based on my own experience growing up in England, is that Palestinians were basically invisible when I was a kid. Virtually invisible. And, you know, you had some people who knew about the history and cared and so on, but you would go to demonstrations, or I would go to demonstrations with my mum in Brighton in, say, 2000, 2001, and there would be 100 people. Or I'd go to demonstrations in London. I mean, in response to really bad things, like Ariel Sharon flattening Jenin, parts of Jenin and Nablus in 2002.
Yeah.
Really serious things, which today would drag, they would kind of catalyse 2, 3, 4, 500,000 people on the streets. You'd get maybe 5,000 max.
Yeah.
And most of them were Muslim.
Yeah.
Most of them were West London Muslims on those demos. 5,000 people, absolute maximum. Now, you're looking at 1 million.
Yeah.
At the peak, and 500,000 on a bad day, 400,000 on a bad day. I mean, that is a seismic shift. And it's not just here, of course, it's all around the world. It's filtered into the mainstream, as in very high-profile people are very pro-Palestine now. Gary Lineker, you could even say Louis Theroux, although obviously he plays his cards close to his chest, but I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But what does that mean for Israeli Hasbara and the Israeli war of hearts and minds machine? It means that it's kind of shifted its resources from the more traditional Hasbara of come to Israel, a romantic, mythical place, a romantic, majestic place.
Yeah.
Go to the beaches of Tel Aviv, party all day, and then go and see the religious sites and so on and so on. It shifted from that kind of, that image of Israel, which was so powerful and effective in the 60s and 70s and 80s. People believed it. I mean, my mum went there first because she thought she was going to Israel.
Yeah, wow.
And then realised as soon as she got there, they were telling her not to mix with Arabs because they smell, or because they might rape her. You know, that she realised something is, I mean, she was only 18, but she immediately realised something is seriously fucked up about this place. I mean, something is seriously sick.
Yeah.
And so she wanted to go and meet Palestinians, and so that's how she met my dad. But people really believed Israeli Hasbara that was kind of formed on the basis of the romantic myth of Israel. Israel was a romantic, it was seen as a romantic place. Nobody thinks that anymore. absolutely nobody who isn't a Zionist believes that or thinks that anymore. Everybody knows. More or less everybody knows. What's changed is that Israel is clawing its resources from that kind of traditional sphere of Hasbara, from selling Israel to ignorant people in the world, to the more hardcore, will break your fingers if you say anything kind of Hasbara. And so all of those resources, as far as I can see, were taken about 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they were shifted towards the kind of, we will tell you what you can and can't say.
Yeah.
You know, the sort of UK Lawyers for Israel, Jewish Chronicle, British Board of Deputies, the lobby, essentially, and the constraining power of the lobby. But the reason Israel's doing that is because it knows it's fundamentally lost the battle of hearts and minds. It's completely lost the battle of hearts and minds.
I agree with you that Israel may have lost the war of hearts and minds. They're clearly losing. And on the long term, they're definitely losing. Like, I always say it. What happened in Gaza, what was documented, what was recorded and filmed in Gaza and seen by everyone all around the world, it is very difficult to erase that from the memory of the international community, from the public opinion. It's also very difficult to erase it from the documentation of history.
Right.
It will be there. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be forgotten. But to what extent is that actually helpful?
Yeah.
I mean, on the ground, Israel is winning.
Yeah.
They are winning more lands. They're winning more, apparently, normalizations deals in the region. And they are forcing their way in Gaza and in the West Bank. So to what extent are we winning in this battle after all? Because, yes, more and more people are now pro-Palestine. More and more people are now speaking up against Israel and for the Palestinian people. But on the ground, the Palestinians are being genocided.
Yeah.
They're being killed in thousands and in tens of thousands. And there doesn't appear that the Palestinians will have a future in Gaza anytime soon. So what are we doing?
I think I'd be interested to hear your view, but this won't end because people in the international community, because public opinion dislikes Israel. This won't end because people in the international community ask Israel to stop doing what it's doing. The only way in which the shifts in international global public opinion, okay, there's a sort of psychological thing, which is good for Palestinians not to be gaslit anymore. It's good for people to know we exist. That's a psychological, symbolic thing. In material terms, the only way in which the shift in global public opinion will have a material impact is in hastening the process of the demise and destruction of Zionism from within.
Yeah.
The only hope I have, if I'm completely honest, it's not going to come from a military solution on the ground. I mean, just look at the capability asymmetries.
Yeah.
There's no hope on that front. It's not going to come because more and more people answer Pew or Gallup or YouGov polls saying that they dislike Israel and they like the idea of a Palestinian state. That's not what I mean. It's going to happen because international pressure feeds into a process that's already underway in which the antagonisms that are inherent to the logic of Zionism leads to the destruction of Zionism in total. And that can take many, many, many forms. So it can take the form of boycott, divestment and sanctions. It can take the form of economic terrorism. And I don't want to get us in trouble, but I think it's important to make the distinction between economic terrorism and, so
what is economic terrorism?
I mean, it's not really a fully fledged or totally recognised phrase. It's kind of a neologism, but it would be, for example, what the Houthis were doing.
Yeah.
Right? Affecting Israel's frontline trade with the world. That in conjunction with a broad-based, concerted asphyxiation of the Israeli economy through boycott, divestment and sanctions, plus cultural boycotts everywhere, a blanket as far and wide as we can possibly get, plus, so total isolation, you see what I'm saying? Cultural, economic isolation of Israel. Plus, and so what that would do, Ahmed, in my view, again, it's not enough on its own.
Yeah.
But what it would do is it would hasten the process in which those kind of antagonisms inherent in Zionism come to the surface and overwhelm the ethno-state. Because, I mean, we know the inherent antagonisms at the heart of Zionism. It's a settler colonial society built on the idea of ethnic supremacy on someone else's land with a large native inhabitant population, with a large and growing diaspora around the world, and it's sustained on a lie. I mean, it's sustained on multiple lies. One, of course, being that it was that the Palestinians don't really exist, and that they weren't there before, and that it was a terra nullius, and then the lies that need to be sustained generation after generation, inculcated into person after person, community after community, in order to sustain a racist society. You have to believe, you have to make sure that your children believe that Palestinians or the other is inferior. You have to ensure that every person in that society, or a large critical mass, subscribes to the view that you're dealing with animals.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that the Zionist instrumentation or architecture or infrastructure has been very effective at doing that. I don't doubt it. But it can't do it ad infinitum forever.
Yeah.
And when, Shir Hever, the Israeli economist, said when a country commits genocide, it commits suicide. And I think soon enough that happens to any society that commits genocide. It certainly can't continue to exist in the form that it presently does. So I think it's about using international public opinion to act as an input into more material things like economic asphyxiation, cultural and political isolation, to then heat up, and in so doing, in heating up, speed up the rate of decline through those antagonisms inherent in Zionism. And I'll just say one final thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know I've been going on and on. Zoran Mamdani being elected in New York, that's an example of, okay, he ran a brilliant campaign, he's a brilliant candidate. Of course, a lot of that was about cost of living. A lot of that was about bread and butter issues in New York. But let's not forget, and let's not ignore the fact, or let the other side distract us from the fact, that it was also a win for pro-Palestine politics.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest cities in the world, in the West. If not like the most important city in the West. It's now going to have a pro-Palestine, well, if he wins the mayoral race. But he's now the Democratic nominee. If he wins, it will be arguably the most important city in the West with a pro-Palestine mayor. If we can get that, not just in New York, but in Los Angeles, Chicago, London, then you have a serious constellation of urban power that can also add to that process that I was talking about.
I believe that what the genocide in Gaza made very clear is that it drew a line between the good people and the bad people, the evil people, to be honest. Because no one can ever say that they did not know what was going on in Gaza.
Right.
And I know that we're winning the public opinion because most people are good people.
Yeah.
And when they hear about what's happening in Gaza, when they see what's happening in Gaza, they will have they will change their perspective about Palestine. They will be more pro-Palestine. What I am worried about recently is that some people, and unfortunately, most of these people are in high positions of power in the West. These people are evil people. These people are racist people. And they no longer pretend that they care about human rights or justice or the rights of the Palestinians. They're saying that they are pro-Israel no matter what Israel does. And they will going to support Israel no matter what Israel does. And they prove to the world that they're racist people that don't care about the Palestinians, and they care about Israel only because Israel is Israel. And nothing in the world will change their mind. So I believe that we're going to another phase in the future where the evil people, the bad people, will be more bold and more courageous with their evil intentions towards Palestine. And that will bring us to another level of fight between the good and the bad people, not only in Palestine, but all around the world. And we must win this fight, because if they win, if fascism wins, I think the future is going to be very, very bad.
Yeah. I agree with you to the extent that I think that shift in the kind of direction of Hasbara resources, you know, the state of Israel shifting its focus from endearing itself to the world to compelling the world, impelling the world, you know, forcing the world to support it, that's only going to get more extreme. But I still see that as the kind of the corollary, the flip side of Zionist decline, Israeli decline. Grabbing onto and clawing at power through institutions in the West, sympathetic institutions in the West, and sympathetic establishments, military, media, political, and so on. I think you're right that I think we're going to have to continue the fight outside of Palestine if we want to see any resolution inside, because I think you're right that those processes that we've seen, i.e. the total skew or disparity between what the public wants and what the governments are delivering, in most cases, there are some notable and noble exceptions.
Yes.
I think that that's going to get wider
Yeah.
as Israel becomes more desperate for survival.
Yes.
And by extension, its baggage handlers and, you know, supporters and so on in the West become more desperate to underwrite its survival. Yeah. I want to ask you, if I may, I want to ask you about how you feel day to day. Like, I don't know if you agree, and again, you must feel it more acutely than me, I think, but, you know, it seems to me that there isn't enough conversation, maybe there is and I'm just not in on the conversations, about Palestinian rage and about Palestinian pessimism. I think it's very important that we stay optimistic, hopeful, but there needs to, I think, be space given to the discussion of those kinds of themes as well. Because I know that you must feel, well, I don't know, I don't want to assume. Do you feel rage? Do you feel pessimism?
There are two things maybe I have to say. I think when it comes to Gaza or when it comes to Palestine, I'm very pessimistic, to be honest. I think the Palestinians are suffering a lot. And I think they will suffer a lot in the future. I do not think that tomorrow or today or in 1 year or 2 years or maybe 10 years, the situation will be better for the Palestinians. I think it will decline and decline and decline. And I'm very pessimistic when it comes to that. But at the same time, I think Israel is also losing. Because in the long run, Israel will not win this fight. Maybe Israel will win now the battle in Gaza. But they are winning the battle in Gaza. Let's be honest. I mean, I don't think the resistance in Gaza can defeat Israel militarily. They can't. They can't. No matter how much you think they are brave and they're fighting and every day they like attack a tank here or there, but they cannot win this battle militarily. And unfortunately, we are governed with a world that only adores and supports the military power, and they don't care about humanity or human rights or law. International law does not have any meaning nowadays in the world. And because of that, I'm very pessimistic for the future of the Palestinians in the short term. But at the same time, in the long run, Israel is losing. As I said before, this public opinion is a changing, and the public opinion is very, very important for us and for Israel. Israel cannot win without the public support, without the Western support. Israel church itself as one of the global north, one of the Western countries, with the Western power, democracy and the most moral army and all of this nonsense. But it is proving to the world that it has nothing to do with law. It has nothing to do with the human rights. It is a barbaric state that lives off the blood of the Palestinian people. And in the long term, that is not helpful for Israel. In the long term, people will not just forget that Israel committed a genocide. People will not deal with Israel as a normal state, as a normal country. Israel will always be viewed in history, in time, as this state that committed a genocide, that this state that has committed ethnic cleansing, that this state that is built on the ruins of the Palestinian lands and homes. And we Palestinians, they will never be able to destroy all of us. We will always be there.
Yeah.
They could commit a genocide in Palestine. They could kill 1 million, 2 million Palestinians. And that's why I don't want Palestinians to die, by the way. I don't want the Palestinians to die for any cause. I want the Palestinians to live. Israel, unfortunately, has the power to kill millions of Palestinians, but they will not be able to kill all the Palestinian people. And as long as there is Palestinians, like me and you and him and her, I think we will always keep the flame alive. We will always keep the cause alive in the hearts and in the minds of the people. Now, Palestine is no longer a political dispute between two parties. Palestine has become a movement in the world, a movement for justice, a movement for equality, a movement for human rights, and more people join us. And the more Israel kills of Palestinians, and unfortunately they're killing a lot of Palestinians, the more they kill of Palestinians, the more people adopt Palestine, and the more people join the Palestine movement everywhere. So we exceeded the boundaries of the map of Palestine right now. Palestine has become a universal, an international movement, and it will only grow. The Palestine movement will not dwindle. It will not disappear. It will only grow and become bigger and bigger and bigger and more influential and more powerful with time. And Israel knows that, by the way. And there is nothing that they can do to crush the Palestinian movement. Because those who are joining the Palestine movement, they're not joining Palestine movement because it's lucrative, because it is...
certainly not that.
Not that. They join the Palestine movement because they believe in the Palestine movement with all their heart. And you can't find that. You can't fight that. And if you fight it, it will only grow bigger. It will be stronger. So yes, I'm pessimistic for the Palestinians, unfortunately, and I'm optimistic for the world. Israel cannot survive this way. And it's very important, and I really want to end with that because we're more than 1 hour. I really want to end with that. I want our audience and the people who are watching us and people who are pessimistic and people who are watching the horror and the genocide that's taking place in Palestine not to lose hope and to use their energy, their passion, their love for justice and freedom to do something useful with all of that. Even if Palestine is defeated in this battle, even if Gaza is defeated in this battle, I don't want people to be defeated because the war is ongoing and it will continue. And we need them to use their emotions, their passion, their power to fight the Israeli regime in every way possible. I want them to continue the protesting. No matter what happens in Palestine, continue the protest. No matter what happens in Palestine, continue the BDS, boycott Israel. Whatever happens, boycott Israel. Make Israel a pariah state. Make Israel a rogue state. And deal with Israel as such. Don't ever deal with the Israeli army or Israeli institutions or Israeli universities at all, whatever happens. And make the cost of the occupation, make the cost of the genocide very expensive. Because, unfortunately, economics...
Money talks for all of
Money
these
talks
things.
through, especially for Israel.
Yeah.
Especially for Israel.
Yeah.
And we need to fight Israel economically.
Yeah.
That is very, very, very important.
Absolutely.
We need to fight Israel on the media, on the narrative, and in every way possible. And that is where Israel will be defeated. But Karim or Kieran,
We still haven't decided. I still haven't decided. No, as long as I'm here with you, my brother, it's Karim.
thank you very much, Karim or Kieran, for joining me today. And I really enjoyed this discussion. I really enjoyed it. You know, speaking to a Palestinian from Jerusalem, it's always very nice. And very
You're
good.
inspiring to me.
Habibi, thank you very much. And
Thanks for
inshallah
having
next
me.
time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
You know, when I was a kid, I was growing up in England and I was conscious of being a bit Palestinian and a bit something else. And the bit of me that was Palestinian kind of grew larger and larger in my imagination and my thinking. And I was so frustrated all the time that the BBC and ITV and Sky, all the usual suspects, just gave blanket coverage to Israel, and that there was virtually no coverage of Palestine, no honest coverage, that's for sure. And I felt gaslit and frustrated on top of all the other things that teenagers feel all the time. So the fact that Palestine Deep Dive exists now, despite the horror in Gaza, despite the horror in Palestine, the fact that Palestinians have a voice in the Anglosphere media and in the Anglosphere world is so, so important. I'm asking you today to consider becoming a regular subscriber to Palestine Deep Dive, asking that you consider giving as little as £2 a month so that they can continue with the excellent work that they're doing, the amazing deep dive investigations, journalism, and also, I think most importantly, centering Palestinian voices.